"Officer, is your body camera recording?" Naomi Carter's voice was calm enough to make Officer Ryan Cole pause, but only for half a second. Red and blue lights washed across the polished fairings of the Ducati Panigale V4 parked along the shoulder, turning its deep red paint into alternating flashes of crimson and violet beneath the fading evening sky. Naomi stood beside the motorcycle with her hands secured behind her, her riding gloves resting on the pavement near the rear tire, while traffic whispered past on the four-lane road. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't demanding special treatment. She wasn't even asking to leave. She wanted one thing confirmed: a record. Ryan touched the camera mounted on his uniform and gave her a thin, impatient look. "It's recording." Naomi held his gaze. Good. That single word irritated him more than an argument would have. 10 feet away, Officer Derek Walsh stood beside the patrol cruiser, watching his partner while the radio murmured through an open window. Something about the stop no longer felt routine. Ryan had already told dispatch that the motorcycle might be stolen, yet Naomi had not behaved like someone caught with stolen property. She had pulled over immediately. She had followed instructions. She had answered every question without raising her voice. Most unsettling of all, she seemed less worried about herself than about making sure every detail of the encounter was preserved. Ryan interpreted that composure as arrogance. "You think that camera changes something?" he asked. Naomi looked briefly toward the Ducati, its engine now silent after carrying her through downtown traffic only minutes earlier. "I think records matter." Ryan almost laughed. To him, this was simple. A young black woman had been riding a motorcycle worth more than many used cars, and something about the picture had bothered him from the moment he saw her pass his cruiser. Now he believed he had found the explanation. Somewhere, he told himself, there had to be a missing report, a registration problem, something that would prove his instincts right. Derek wasn't nearly as certain. He glanced down at the information on the cruiser computer, then back toward Naomi. No frantic movements. No inconsistent story. No attempt to run. Just a woman standing beneath flashing lights with an almost unnerving patience. "Ryan," Derek called quietly, "we should verify everything again." Ryan didn't turn around. Already doing that. Naomi heard the exchange, but said nothing. The evening breeze moved gently along the roadside, carrying the distant sound of horns and tires across asphalt. A phone began vibrating inside the leather bag secured to the Ducati. Once, twice, then again. Ryan glanced toward it. Expecting somebody? Naomi's expression barely changed. "Yes." "Who?" She waited a beat before answering. "Someone who's wondering why I'm late." Ryan smirked, convinced he still controlled every important fact in the situation. He had no idea why Naomi cared so much about his camera. He had no idea why Derek was beginning to look uneasy. And he certainly had no idea that the quiet woman standing beside that Ducati understood exactly what happened when authority stopped following the law. Ryan Cole thought the handcuffs had ended the questions. In reality, they had just started the record. 11 minutes earlier, none of it had seemed important. Naomi Carter stepped through the side entrance of the federal courthouse just after 6 in the evening, leaving behind the quiet marble corridors, security checkpoints, and measured voices that had filled her day. Outside, the city was settling into rush hour beneath a warm amber sky. Cars moved steadily through downtown intersections. Office workers crossed beneath changing lights, and somewhere beyond the government buildings a siren faded into the distance. Naomi stopped beside her red Ducati Panigale V4 and allowed herself one quiet moment before putting on her riding jacket and gloves. Riding was one of the few places where her professional life disappeared completely. On the motorcycle, there were no crowded calendars, no stacks of legal briefs, no rooms waiting for her decision. There was only the road, the machine, and the discipline of paying attention. She secured her leather bag, checked the mirrors, started the engine, and eased into traffic. Several blocks later, Officer Ryan Cole sat behind the wheel of his patrol cruiser with Derek Walsh in the passenger seat. Their shift had been uneventful until the Ducati passed through the intersection ahead of them. Ryan's eyes followed it. "That is an expensive bike," he said. Derek glanced up briefly. "Looks like it." The light changed, and Ryan pulled forward. From behind, they could see the rider clearly enough whenever traffic slowed. Naomi obeyed the speed limit, signaled before changing lanes, and kept a steady distance from the vehicles ahead. There was nothing remarkable about the way she rode. Still, Ryan continued watching. At the next light, the Ducati stopped about 30 yards ahead. Naomi lifted her visor for a moment as she waited. Ryan leaned slightly toward the windshield. His expression changed. Derek noticed. "What?" he asked. Ryan did not answer immediately. His eyes moved from Naomi to the motorcycle and back again. "Something feels off." Derek looked toward the Ducati. "What exactly?" Ryan tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. "I want to check the plate." He entered the number into the cruiser computer. Seconds passed. The registration returned without an obvious warning. Ryan stared at the screen longer than necessary. Derek read the same information. "Looks clean." Ryan remained silent. The Ducati moved when the light turned green. So did the cruiser. Naomi noticed them in her mirror after another block. She had spent enough years around law enforcement to recognize when a patrol car was simply traveling behind someone and when an officer had become interested. She changed nothing about her riding. 2 blocks later, Ryan was still there. Then the lights on top of the cruiser came alive. Red. Blue. Red again. Naomi checked her speedometer, signaled, and calmly guided the Ducati onto a safe shoulder. She shut off the engine, removed her helmet, and waited. Derek looked at Ryan before opening his door. "What are we stopping her for?" Ryan reached for the handle. "I'm going to find out why that motorcycle does not fit the picture." Derek remained still for a second. He looked once more at the clean information glowing on the computer screen, then toward Naomi waiting beside the Ducati. There had been no violation he could identify, no warning from dispatch, and no report connected to the motorcycle. Yet Ryan was already walking toward her as though the unanswered question in his own mind were evidence enough. Ryan approached the Ducati slowly, one hand resting near his belt while his eyes moved from the motorcycle to Naomi and back again. Naomi had already removed her helmet and placed it carefully on the seat. She remained beside the bike, calm and attentive, waiting for him to explain why she had been stopped. Derek followed several steps behind, carrying the uncomfortable expression of a man who still had not heard a clear reason for the stop. Ryan stopped about 6 feet away. "Whose motorcycle is this?" The question landed differently than the usual request for license and registration. Naomi noticed immediately. She looked at Ryan for a moment before answering. "It belongs to me." Ryan glanced at the Ducati as though her answer had created another problem instead of resolving one. "This is your motorcycle?" "Yes, officer." "License and registration?" Naomi nodded. "My license is in my jacket pocket. The registration is in the document pouch under the seat." "May I get them?" Her careful wording seemed to surprise Derek. Ryan gave permission, watching every movement as Naomi retrieved the documents and handed them over. Ryan studied the license first, then the registration. Naomi Carter. Same name, same address, same vehicle identification information. Everything matched. Derek leaned slightly closer and checked the paperwork himself. "It matches what came back on the computer," he said. For a moment, the only sound was traffic passing behind them. This should have been the point when the tension disappeared. Instead, Ryan looked at Naomi again. "How long have you had the bike?" "A little over a year." "Where did you buy it?" Naomi gave him the name of the dealership. Ryan continued. "What do you do for work?" Naomi's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "How is my occupation related to this traffic stop?" Derek looked toward Ryan. It was a reasonable question. Ryan did not seem to appreciate it. "I'm asking the questions right now." Naomi remained composed. "And I am cooperating. I would also like to understand why I was stopped." Ryan glanced at the motorcycle again. The polished red bodywork reflected the patrol lights in sharp flashes. A motorcycle like this attracts attention. Naomi waited. "That does not answer my question." Ryan's jaw tightened. He had expected nervousness, perhaps confusion, perhaps an explanation offered too quickly. What he received instead was precision. Naomi was not challenging his authority. She was asking him to define it. Derek stepped closer to Ryan and lowered his voice. "The registration is valid." There is no stolen vehicle report attached to the plate. Ryan barely acknowledged him. Run the identification again. Derek hesitated. We already did. Run it again. Naomi watched the exchange without interrupting. She had seen this pattern before, although usually from the other side of courtroom. A conclusion formed first. Evidence was then searched for to support it. She took a slow breath and looked directly at Ryan. Officer Cole, if there is a specific concern about my motorcycle, please tell me what it is. Ryan stared at her. People lie about ownership every day, then verify the records. That is what we are doing. You already did. Silence followed. Derek looked down at the documents in his hand. Naomi's name was there in plain print. Nothing about the paperwork supported Ryan's suspicion. Nothing on the computer did either. Yet Ryan was no longer trying to discover whether he had been right. He was trying to avoid admitting that he might have been wrong. Derek returned to the cruiser and entered Naomi's information again, even though he already knew what the screen was likely to show. Ryan stayed near the Ducati, holding Naomi's license as if another minute of staring at it might reveal something the database had missed. Naomi stood quietly beneath the alternating patrol lights. The evening traffic continued around them, indifferent to the tension gathering on the shoulder. Finally, Derek looked up from the computer. Same result, he called. License valid. Registration valid. No warrants. No stolen vehicle report. Naomi looked at Ryan. Am I free to leave? It was a simple question. Ryan did not answer it. Instead, he studied the leather bag secured behind the Ducati's seat. What is in the bag? Personal belongings and work documents. What kind of work documents? Naomi paused. Documents that have nothing to do with this stop. Ryan's expression hardened. I need you to step away from the motorcycle. Naomi did not move immediately. For what reason? Because I told you to. Derek left the cruiser and approached again. Ryan, everything came back clear. Ryan turned toward him. I heard you. Then what are we doing? That question hung between them. Naomi watched Derek carefully. Until that moment, he had mostly followed Ryan's lead, but something had changed. He was no longer merely uncertain. He was beginning to understand that the facts were moving in one direction while his partner was moving in another. Ryan faced Naomi again. Step away from the motorcycle. Naomi complied, moving several feet toward the shoulder where there was more space between her and passing traffic. Across the street, a man waiting near a bus stop raised his phone. Another driver slowed before continuing through the intersection. Ryan noticed the attention, and instead of calming him, it seemed to make him more determined to control the scene. Turn around, please. Naomi looked directly at him. Am I being detained? Ryan hesitated. Yes. On what basis? We are investigating possible vehicle theft. Derek immediately looked at him. Ryan. Naomi remained still. Your own database shows that I am the registered owner. Turn around. Naomi took a measured breath. She had spent years listening to people explain decisions after they had already made them. She knew the difference between confidence and defensiveness, between lawful authority and authority searching for justification. She also knew that the roadside was not the place to win an argument by raising her voice. So she turned around. Ryan secured her hands behind her without incident. The metallic click was quiet, almost ordinary, but Derek's expression changed the moment he heard it. Naomi looked toward him. Officer Walsh, you confirmed the registration? Derek swallowed. Yes. And there is no stolen vehicle report? Correct. Ryan interrupted. That is enough. Naomi turned her eyes toward the body camera on Ryan's uniform. Her voice remained level. Then please make sure the record reflects what Officer Walsh just confirmed. Ryan gave a dismissive shake of his head. Behind them, Naomi's phone began vibrating inside the leather bag. The screen briefly illuminated through the partially open top, displaying an incoming call from the United States District Court Clerk's office. Derek saw it. His eyes stayed on the screen for a second longer than Ryan noticed. Then he looked at Naomi, and for the first time since the stop began, Derek wondered whether the biggest problem on that roadside had nothing to do with the motorcycle. Derek looked again at the glowing phone inside Naomi's leather bag. The words United States District Court Clerk's office disappeared when the call ended, but the uneasy feeling they created did not. Ryan had missed it completely. He was focused on the growing number of people watching from across the street and on maintaining control of a situation that had begun slipping away from the facts. Naomi stood beside the Ducati, hands secured behind her, breathing slowly as the evening breeze moved through the trees lining the road. She had already given Ryan every reasonable opportunity to correct course. Now she decided to give him 3 more. "Officer Cole, please verify the registration one more time." Ryan exhaled impatiently. "We already verified it." "Then you know the motorcycle is registered to me." "That does not end an investigation." Naomi nodded slightly. "Then please tell me what evidence is keeping the investigation open." Ryan stared at her without answering. Derek shifted his weight. He knew the answer. There was no new evidence. Naomi continued, her voice controlled. "If you believe there is still a legitimate concern, call your supervisor." Ryan gave a short, humorless laugh. "I did not need a supervisor to conduct a traffic stop." "I did not say you did. I asked you to call one." "That was the second opportunity." Ryan ignored it. Naomi's phone began vibrating again. This time Derek stepped closer to the motorcycle without touching the bag. The caller was the same office. Beside the phone, partly visible beneath a folder, was a document envelope bearing an official federal court seal. Derek's expression tightened. He looked toward Naomi, then toward Ryan. "Ryan, maybe we should get a supervisor out here." Ryan turned sharply. "Why?" Derek lowered his voice. "Because there is nothing in the system supporting vehicle theft, and this is getting bigger than it needs to be." Ryan looked toward the people recording across the street. Pride settled where caution should have been. "We are finishing what we started." Naomi heard every word. She closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them. The third opportunity remained. "Officer Cole." Ryan faced her. "What now?" Naomi looked directly at the camera mounted on his uniform. "Please state clearly for the recording why I am still being detained after your partner confirmed that my license is valid, my registration is valid, there are no warrants, and there is no stolen vehicle report." Silence. A passing car moved through the intersection, its tires humming against the pavement. Ryan's expression changed, not because he suddenly understood Naomi, but because he understood the precision of her question. "You did not get to conduct this stop," he said. "No, Naomi replied. But you're responsible for documenting it." Derek looked away. He had heard attorneys use language like that. He had heard supervisors use it during internal reviews. Naomi was not guessing. She understood procedure too well. Then the patrol radio crackled. Dispatch asked Derek to confirm Naomi Carter's full name and date of birth. Derek walked quickly back to the cruiser and responded. A few seconds passed, then several more. The radio came alive again, but the dispatcher's tone was different now, slower and noticeably careful. "Unit 12, stand by. We are verifying an additional federal record associated with that name." Derek froze with one hand resting on the open cruiser door. Ryan finally turned toward him. Naomi said nothing. She had offered 3 chances to stop the mistake. Now the system itself was about to explain why he should have taken the first one. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The patrol radio filled the silence with a faint electronic hiss, while Derek stood beside the cruiser, waiting for dispatch to return. Ryan looked from his partner to Naomi, trying to understand why a routine database check had suddenly become an additional federal verification. Naomi remained exactly where she had been, beside the red Ducati under the fading evening light, her composure unchanged. What Ryan could not see was that Naomi had spent years learning how much could be revealed by silence. In a courtroom, people often rush to fill it. Nervous witnesses added unnecessary details. Attorneys sometimes weakened strong arguments by refusing to stop talking. And people who believed they could not possibly be wrong often exposed themselves simply because silence made them uncomfortable. Naomi had learned to wait. Long before that evening, she had built her career on discipline, evidence, and the principle that authority meant nothing without restraint. The motorcycle was part of a different life, one deliberately separated from the courthouse. She had purchased it after years of postponing something she had wanted since law school. On weekends, she rode quiet roads outside the city, where court calendars and case files could disappear for an hour beneath the steady rhythm of the highway. Most people who saw her in riding gear never imagined what she did Monday through Friday. Naomi preferred it that way. Her position was not supposed to be a shield she carried into every ordinary interaction. She had never expected strangers to recognize her, and she certainly did not believe respect should depend on whether they did. That was why she had not announced her title when Ryan first questioned her. She had shown a valid license. She had provided valid registration. Those facts should have been enough. Derek was beginning to understand that distinction. He remembered the unanswered calls from a United States District Court clerk's office. He remembered the federal seal inside Naomi's bag. More importantly, he remembered every decision that had brought them to this moment despite the absence of any record supporting Ryan's suspicion. The radio finally crackled again. Unit 12 confirmed the detained individual is Naomi Elaine Carter. Derek reached for his microphone. Confirmed. Another pause followed. This one felt longer. Ryan stepped toward the cruiser. What federal record? He asked quietly. Derek shook his head. I do not know yet. Naomi watched them without speaking. Across the street, the man with the phone was still recording. Traffic lights changed from green to yellow to red. The city kept moving while the small roadside scene seemed suspended in place. Then dispatch returned. Unit 12, do not take further enforcement action at this time. Your watch commander has been notified and is responding to your location. Derek's eyes lifted immediately. Ryan stared at the radio. For what reason? The dispatcher paused before answering. Federal identity verification requires supervisory notification. Ryan's confidence finally showed its first visible fracture. He turned toward Naomi. What exactly do you do? Naomi met his eyes. You have had everything you needed to determine whether this motorcycle belongs to me. That is not what I asked. I know. Derek looked at Ryan, then toward the road where another patrol vehicle had just turned into view several hundred feet away. Its lights were not flashing. It was approaching slowly, deliberately. Naomi recognized the vehicle type used by command staff before Ryan did. She said nothing. The time for warnings was over. Now, someone else was coming to ask the questions. The command vehicle rolled onto the shoulder and stopped about 20 feet behind the patrol cruiser. The driver's door opened, and Captain Michael Grant stepped out wearing a dark uniform marked by the quiet details of senior command. He did not hurry. He looked first at the Ducati, then at Naomi, then at Ryan and Derek. His expression changed almost immediately. Judge Carter. 2 words. That was all it took. Ryan turned toward Naomi so quickly that his confusion was impossible to hide. Derek lowered his eyes for a moment, as if the final piece of a puzzle had just fallen into place. Captain Grant walked closer. Judge Naomi Carter? Naomi gave a small nod. Yes, Captain. Grant looked at her secured hands, then at Ryan. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything said during the entire stop. Ryan opened his mouth. Captain, we were investigating a possible stolen motorcycle. Grant's eyes moved to Derek. Was the motorcycle reported stolen? Derek answered carefully. No, sir. Does the registration match, Judge Carter? Yes, sir. Any warrants? No, sir. Grant looked back at Ryan. Then why is she still detained? Ryan searched for an answer. Minutes earlier, every question had seemed easy when he was asking them. Now the same facts sounded completely different when someone else arranged them in order. There were circumstances that seemed suspicious. Grant waited. What circumstances? Ryan glanced toward the Ducati, then toward Naomi, then toward the people still watching from across the street. Nothing he could say seemed strong enough to survive the silence. Naomi finally spoke. Captain Grant, before anything else, I would like the body camera recordings preserved from the beginning of the stop. Grant nodded immediately. They will be, she continued, the dispatch record as well. Understood. Ryan stared at her. There was no triumph in her voice, no threat. That somehow made the moment harder for him. Grant instructed Derek to remove the restraints. A moment later, Naomi brought her hands forward and adjusted the sleeves of her riding jacket. She did not rub her wrists dramatically or demand an apology. Instead, she walked to the Ducati and checked that her belongings were still secure. Ryan remained near the patrol cruiser, his earlier certainty replaced by a stunned stillness. You are a federal judge? He finally asked. Naomi turned toward him. Yes. Ryan looked almost offended by the information, as though her title had been withheld specifically to trap him. Why did you not tell me? Naomi studied him for a long moment. Because my title was not part of the registration. Nobody answered. The traffic signal at the intersection changed again, casting green light across the pavement. Naomi stepped closer, not with anger, but with the measured calm Ryan had misunderstood from the beginning. My license was valid. The motorcycle was registered to me. There was no stolen vehicle report. There was no warrant. Those facts were true before you knew what I did for a living. Derek looked at Ryan. Captain Grant said nothing. He did not need to. Naomi's phone vibrated again inside the leather bag. This time she retrieved it. The courthouse clerk had called 3 times. Naomi glanced at the screen, then back at Ryan. Respect under the law cannot begin after you discover someone's job title. Ryan had spent the entire stop believing the most important question was who owned the motorcycle. Standing beneath the fading red and blue reflections, he finally understood that the question now facing him was far more serious. Why had the correct answer never been enough? Captain Grant asked Naomi to remain for a few more minutes while he documented what had happened, but Naomi made one thing clear before anyone continued. I do not want this handled differently because I am a federal judge. Ryan looked up. Grant studied her carefully. Naomi continued. If the stop was improper 5 minutes ago, it was improper before you recognized me. My position does not change the facts. Grant nodded. Understood. Naomi glanced toward the man across the street who was still holding his phone, then toward Derek. Preserve the body camera footage. Preserve the dispatch recordings. Get the witness information. Review the database timestamps. Let the record speak for itself. There was no anger in her instructions, only precision. Ryan seemed almost confused by the absence of retaliation. He had expected her title to become a weapon the moment it was revealed. Instead, Naomi refused to use it that way. Judge Carter, he began, I made a judgment call. Naomi turned toward him. Then the judgment call can be reviewed. Ryan lowered his voice. I was doing my job. That is exactly why the review matters. Derek stood silently beside the cruiser. Every minute of the stop was replaying in his mind now. The clean registration. The absence of a stolen vehicle report. Naomi asking why she had been stopped. Ryan ordering another check. Derek himself recognizing that something was wrong and still waiting too long to say it clearly. Captain Grant turned toward him. Officer Walsh, I need your account separately. Derek nodded. Yes, sir. Ryan looked at his partner, and for the first time that evening, there was something close to fear in his expression. Not fear of Naomi. Fear of the record. Derek took a slow breath. Captain, I confirmed early in the stop that the registration matched Ms. Carter and that there was no stolen vehicle report. I told Officer Cole that. Ryan immediately interrupted. You agreed there could still be an issue. Derek looked at him. I agreed to verify the information. I did not find an issue. Silence returned. Naomi watched without satisfaction. Accountability was not supposed to feel entertaining. It was supposed to be accurate. Captain Grant instructed Ryan to step away from active duty for the remainder of the shift pending supervisory review. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public humiliation, no instant declaration of guilt. Just procedure beginning to move in the direction it should have moved from the start. Grant then turned to Naomi. Is there anything else you want documented? Naomi looked at the Ducati, then at the flashing patrol lights reflected across its red bodywork. One question. Grant waited. Naomi's voice softened, but the words carried farther than anything she had said before. If I had been a teacher, a nurse, a college student, or for someone working 2 jobs with nobody important waiting for me, when would this stop have ended? Derek looked down. Ryan said nothing. Naomi continued. Do not investigate this because you discovered I have authority. Investigate it because I should not have needed authority to be believed. Grant gave a slow nod. That will be part of the record. Naomi put on her gloves, secured her phone, and lifted her helmet from the Ducati. Behind her, Derek began giving his statement. This time, he left nothing out. 3 weeks later, Naomi Carter walked through the federal courthouse beneath the same pale morning light she had seen hundreds of times before, but something about the building felt different. Perhaps it was not the courthouse that had changed. Perhaps it was the memory she now carried into it. The review of the roadside stop had moved quietly and methodically, exactly as Naomi had requested. Investigators preserved the body camera recordings, dispatch communications, database searches, witness video, and written statements from everyone involved. The timeline left little room for interpretation. Naomi's license had been valid. Her Ducati had been properly registered. No stolen vehicle report had existed. No warrant had appeared. Yet the detention had continued after those facts were known. Derek Walsh told investigators everything. He admitted that he had recognized the warning signs early, but had allowed uncertainty and loyalty to his partner to keep him from intervening soon enough. His honesty did not erase that failure, but it mattered. Ryan Cole faced an administrative investigation based not on Naomi's influence, but on the record he had helped create himself. The same body camera he had treated as routine now preserved every question, every verification, every opportunity to reconsider. Naomi asked for no special punishment. She requested no private favor from the department. She wanted the process to answer the question that had followed her since that evening. Would Ryan have stopped himself if nobody important had arrived? As Naomi entered her courtroom that morning, conversations softened and people rose. She took her place and looked across the room. Attorneys organized files. A clerk checked the calendar. Ordinary citizens waited quietly for their names to be called. Some looked confident. Others looked frightened. None of them should have needed an impressive title to receive fairness. During a recess, Naomi walked through a secure hallway where evidence from an unrelated proceeding had been prepared for review. On a nearby table sat a sealed evidence bag containing a pair of standard handcuffs. She stopped for only a moment. They were not the same pair from that evening, but the sight brought back the sound immediately. One quiet click, a sound that had meant control to Ryan and documentation to Naomi. She thought about how differently the encounter might have ended for someone who did not understand procedure, someone who became frightened under pressure, someone without a courthouse calling their phone, or a captain who recognized their name. That was the part she could not forget. Later that afternoon, Captain Grant sent confirmation that the department was reviewing not only Ryan's conduct, but also its supervisory and intervention policies. Derek had requested additional training and agreed to speak openly about why remaining silent when something seemed wrong could become its own kind of failure. Naomi read the message once, then closed it. Justice was rarely one dramatic moment. More often, it was a collection of smaller choices made after the attention disappeared. Outside, evening settled over the city. Naomi left the courthouse, reached her red Ducati, and rested one gloved hand on the handlebar. She had never needed the motorcycle to prove she belonged anywhere. She had never needed her judicial title to prove she deserved dignity. That had been a lesson Ryan failed to understand until someone powerful said her name. They respected her after learning her title. Justice demanded that they should have respected her before knowing it.